Hello, hello, hello. Happy Monday, y'all. And welcome to Faith, Purpose, Profit, what I like to call FPP Live, a time I connect with you every Monday at 7 p.m. EST to give you everything you need to live as the highest and best version of who God created you to be. Listen, I'm getting excited because I know that this conversation is really a conversation that God dropped in my spirit last year at this time. And over the course of this last year, I have had so much fun learning and digging in to how all three of those areas, faith, purpose, profit, connect together. And so as we continue in this conversation, that we started a three-part series a couple of weeks ago, and that three-part series is called A Blueprint is Necessary to Generate Revenue in Your Business. And I want you to really understand this. The purpose of a business is two things. One, to be the answer to a group of people that need you, but number two, for you to generate revenue. Because what's the point of having a business if you're not making profit? So, as you do the thing that you were created, crafted, called, and assigned to do, I need you to be clear and uncompromising. And that's really my goal, not just in this series, but in every series I teach you. And so, as we sum up this three-part series, tonight is part three in the three parts. So let me do a little summary, but before I do that, and I see some of you guys are saying hello, hey Joy, and hey Kim, welcome, welcome. As you come in, if you have questions, those of you that are here with me live, post them. If I step on your toes, I want to know if this is good to you. I want to know that too. So with that said, let me just give you a little context to our conversation. So what is a blueprint? So a blueprint is defined as a system that allows you to organize, document, and manage building a house. So what a blueprint does for your business is it helps you document, manage, and build your business. Organize, document, and manage building your business. But in the same way, it also allows you to get in position that God created your dominion, your purpose, your gift to dominate in. So listen, week one, I talked to you about the 5 reasons your business needs a blueprint. And by the way, if you've missed any of these parts, as I'm giving you a quick review, I want to encourage you to go listen to my podcast. My podcast is live every Friday. So if you miss any of these pieces, know that my Friday podcast is a great review for you. Okay. So week one, we talked about the 5 pieces or the 5 reasons your business needs a blueprint. And I dug into the whole fact that God is a God of systems. And why you've got to get in alignment and understand that you have a system in you. Oh, I dug deep in that one. And then last week, our conversation was the recipe to generate profit. Now, after you understand you have a blueprint, your blueprint is really only the methodology for one of the 4 systems you need in your business that you must have if you're going to generate revenue. And so in our conversation last week, I used the context of the 7 ingredients that make up a blueprint to talk about the 4 systems you need in your business that are a must have. Again, if you've missed any of those, go listen to the fpppodcast.com so you can catch up. And if this is your first time with me, please know the way I teach, one builds on the next. And so you need all 3 of these if you're going to really generate revenue. If you're going to have a prosperous business, which takes me to our conversation for this week, which is the prosperous business equation. Oh, there's an equation that every prosperous business must have, only if you're using your powers for good. So let me say this. Prosper means, according to Webster's Dictionary. But before I say this, really what I'm getting ready to teach you in this last session of this 3-part series is bring both week 1 and week 2 together, and I'm getting ready to take it up a notch. Okay. So if you don't have a pen, shame on you, go grab one, because I'm going to go all the way in. Thinking of all the way up, I'm going all the way in. So prosper means to succeed in an enterprise or activity, to become strong and flourishing. Do you realize that God, his intention for you is that you prosper? God's intention for you is that you prosper. So in order to do that, here's the equation that you need in place to prosper. Those of you that are here with me live, I'm getting ready to put it on the screen. It's F plus P equals ROI. Now, you know what the FPP means, right? But it equals ROI. Really, it equals God's ROI. So I'm going to walk you through all 4 of these pieces here in this conversation. And don't take for granted that you know all 3 of these and what they are. And then, dare I say, I want you to check where you are in each of these 3 areas, 4 areas rather. And really Remember, I said it equals God's ROI. Okay. So where you end up when you do F plus P plus P is you give God an ROI. So what does ROI mean? Return on investment. Now, if you've been with me, if you've been following my conversations on Mondays as well as my podcast, you know that everything I teach you, my ultimate goal is that you give God a great return on his investment in you. He's invested DNA, distinct natural ability in you. And so at the end of the day, he made an investment for you to do special work. But what's amazing to me is many of us don't realize that God also gave and invested in us one other thing. Mhm. So here's what I want to say to you before I even say that. If God did so much and was so intentional with how he crafted and created you and gave you the seed of your DNA, again, your distinct natural ability, what's God's return on his investment in you? What are you doing with what he gave you? In addition to your purpose, the other thing God gifted us was his son. Now, I think we overlooked that. Listen, John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life." God so loved the world that he gave his son. I want y'all to get this. Are you in my paper rambling, right? I really need you to get this. Have you ever thought about that? What if someone asked you to give your child, those of you that have children, as a sacrifice for somebody else? Would you do it? Could you do it? And yet, God gave his only son to us. Now, even deeper than that is why he gave it, why he decided to give Jesus to us. Now, listen, John 3:17, which is the next verse says, "For God sent not his son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved." Now, why do we need to be saved? Okay. Now, the thing I think is interesting is when you peel back and really study this Bible verse, is that in the Old Testament, now let me read this first. Exodus 3:2, 13:2. So I'm getting excited, y'all. Exodus 13:2. Let me calm myself down. "Consecrate to me all the firstborn." God asked in the Old Testament. Now, if you have read any Bible verse in the Old Testament, 9 times out of 10, when someone is doing something, God is asking them to consecrate or sacrifice an animal or the firstborn. Even Abraham was asked to sacrifice his firstborn. I'm not going to go into that whole conversation. That's a whole nother learning. But I want you to get this. In the Old Testament, the law was that the firstborn had to be either sacrificed or redeemed. There was no third option. Now, consecrate means to make or declare sacred, to dedicate, to set apart. Now, this is deep, y'all. See, why Jesus was brought down is so we don't no longer have to make a sacrifice. Instead, God sacrificed for us. God was the first to make a sacrifice. You with me? And it's because he sacrificed Jesus that we no longer have to sacrifice the firstborn, but he does ask us to make another kind of sacrifice. Romans 12:1 says this, "I beseech you, therefore, brethren," and I'm going to add sisters, "by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service." Now, what I interpret this Bible verse to mean when it says to present your bodies, it's present yourself. See, when you do the work you're called to do, you're living in sacrifice. Because the world might tell you to do one thing, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to have to contradict and condemn and conform different than what the world says. That's a sacrifice. Those of you that have heard my story, I had a lucrative career in the entertainment industry, loved every minute on it, worked on hot Hollywood shows, bumped elbows with stars, people you've like that on TV and have seen on films. Listen, stars knew my first name. I used to get invited to their Christmas parties at their home. So I was living the dream. And yet, God asked me to sacrifice the 8 years I had put in, my years in undergrad, to the years I had matriculated through the entertainment industry and was doing great, y'all. Making good money. Look, I had all the designer shoes and everything that I could pay for in cash. That's the good money I was making in my 20s. The point I'm making is the world would say, have you lost your mind? And listen, I thought I had lost my mind too, but God asked me to give all that up to do this. And this now has a word for it. In 1993, when I started doing this work, there was no word for it. That's what I mean by sacrifice. You've got to give up what you want to do what God wants. Little did I know that God always wants more and better for you. Didn't even think about that. And so in my own journey, what I realize now is my love always has been for casting and producing. What am I doing now? Casting and producing my clients around their purpose. But I would have never been able to see that if I hadn't made the sacrifice. So listen, again, this is Romans 12:1. Let me read it one more time in case you lost it along my explanation. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice. Now listen, the note in my spirit-filled Bible says this underneath this. The word translated and reasonable can mean pertaining to reason. As such, it suggests that a rational response to God's mercies is a commitment, or is to commit ourselves in an act of worship. To commit yourself in an act of worship. So every time I do the thing I'm called to do, I'm worshiping God. That's all he's asking. When we do the thing that he crafted and created us to do, it's an act of worship. That's God's return. It's just that simple. You get that? So when you do the thing you've been born to do, it's an act of worship. And this is why you need the next three things to do it. Now, there's 4 steps. Obviously, I'm talking to you in this series. I'm going to walk you through the next one, which is going to be the biggest piece to this first part of our conversation. And then I'll walk you through the last 2 in part 2. But this is the one that so many people look over. Everybody wants purpose and profit. You know, FPP is faith, purpose, profit. But the most important ingredient of those 3 is faith. So I need you to really get this, okay? As I make sure I stay on task, because let me tell y'all, I can go on tangents and I don't have that much time. My commitment is always to be here for 30 minutes or less. So if I continue, so I just read Romans 12:1. Here's Romans 12:2. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Do not be conformed to this world. Using myself for an example again. See, I could have conformed and stayed in entertainment. And listen, I was like, Lord, are you sure? I asked him several times, was he sure? Kind of ignored him for a minute, I'm going to be honest. But what I realized is I had to transform what I thought was successful to get in alignment with what God saw as success for me. Even I was telling my executive manager today that I got an opportunity. I was asked to do something with a celebrity that you guys know, but I turned it down. I'm not going to say people's names because I don't want anybody to think I'm sitting in judgment. I'm not. But what I know is it wasn't in alignment with what I know God is calling me to do. This happened a month ago. So I'm sharing this with you because faith is an action word. It's an action verb, really. And so if you're going to do this thing that God has called you to do, you got to do 3 things. You got to take action, you got to persevere, and you got to go through the process. But part of that is understanding that you're going to have to make a sacrifice. That sometimes it's not going to look. Listen, Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is a substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. If you're around me, you hear me say that Bible verse a lot because I've had to live by that. I couldn't see how I was going to do this when I left in 1993. And yet I sacrificed it all to say yes to what God was calling me to do. So as I talk to you about the first 2, taking action and perseverance, first of all, you hear me say over and over, faith without works is dead. Okay. But you've got to do the work and you also got to persevere. So let me explain to you what I mean by walk you through a Bible story. Now there's a story and it's deep that has 3 places in the Bible, kind of told differently because it's from 3 different viewpoints. It's the woman with the issue of blood. So I'm going to look at it from Luke 8:43 through 48, only because I always seem to use Matthew. It's also told in Matthew 9:20 to 22. And it's also told by Mark in Mark 5:25 through 34. Okay. So again, I'm using Luke's account. So here is how it starts. Luke 8:43 and 44 says this. Well, actually 43, let me read first. Now, a woman having a flow of blood for 12 years, who has spent all her livelihood on physicians, could not be healed by anybody. So let's stop there. Can you imagine, my ladies that are with me, that you bled for 12 years every single day? And most of us have a period for once a week, once a month. If I'm gonna be honest with you, I usually have mine for 3 days once a month, and I haven't had one for the last 3 months. I'm going through menopause. Like, is it over? But my point is, imagine, think about what we go through: the smell. Let me keep it real, y'all. The number of napkins we've got to change to keep fresh. Do I need to keep going? Are you guys getting my point? And we right now only have to do that once a month. This woman had to do this every single day for 12 years. So they called her unclean. Yeah, because she probably stank. Because they didn't have sanitary napkins back then. They didn't have the proper things so that, listen, her clothes probably stayed red. Okay, I'm not trying to be, you know, but I need you to understand this. Plus, those of you that have cramps. So she could have been in pain. She could have been uncomfortable. And then on top of all that, she was outcast because nobody wanted her around them. She was unclean. So she was lonely, outcast, and bleeding for 12 whole years. So the next Bible verse says this. This is Luke 8:44. So she came from behind and touched the border of his garment, and immediately her flow of blood stopped. So listen, I want you guys to get this. She was in a crowd. So a couple things. I'm skipping around, but I really need you to understand this, okay? This woman, first of all, was not supposed to be in public. So number one, she had faith. She trusted if I could just touch, not grab Jesus's hand, not if I could just touch any part of him, I'm gonna get healed. I know something can happen. Imagine what that kind of faith must have looked like. If I could just touch, if I could just start my business and not give up, if I could just serve the people I know God is called to serve. Listen, there's been times in my business when I didn't know where the revenue was coming, but I knew God called me to do this. I'm not going to quit, and revenue would come out of nowhere. And I knew that that was happening to test my faith. If I keep it real with you, it was 2007 when I was getting married. I don't know if I've ever told this story online. I may have, I don't remember. And I needed $5,000 at the top of January. I got married, by the way, January 5th, 2007. I needed 5,000 at the top of January because we had a huge chunk of money coming at the end of January. I needed 5,000 to maintain just until we got that next chunk. And this was December 26th. I remember like it was yesterday. I told my then assistant, listen, I can't worry about this. I'm getting ready to go. It might have been December 26th, 24th. Anyway, I said, listen, I'm going to go hang out with my family for the holidays. And then I'm going to get married. And I just got to give this to God. This is God's business. I can't worry about that. I'm going to go get married. I'm not going to stress about it. I didn't think about it once. I enjoyed the holidays with my family. My husband and I went to Mexico, got married. I laid on the beach, had a great time, did my honeymoon. I come home the exact day that I said we needed the money. My assistant calls me and says, oh my God, Nicole, we have a $5,000 check in the mail. Now, this was in my nonprofit, by the way. Okay. And so I looked at the woman's name on the check and I said, because she had sent out, listen, I looked at the woman's name on the check and I was like, I don't know that name. So then I looked through my database to see if any of my board members knew her name. And I'm like, she's not in our database anywhere. So then I emailed all my board members to my nonprofit. Nobody knew who this woman was. So I said, well, let me just call and say thank you. I called the number on the check and I said, hi, may I speak to so-and-so? And the person said, who is this? I said, hi, my name is Nicole. I introduced myself. I told them I'm the CEO of, the name of the company. And I said, I'm calling because, she made a huge donation and I want to say thank you. The woman said, so-and-so died. And it was a day we prayed that she died, but I didn't receive the check until the date I needed it. And it was the exact amount. I'm sharing that with you because the many people that quit when things get hard, the many people that give up when, I'm not sure how to do this. I need you to understand this woman with the issue of blood said, I'm going to get to Jesus by any means necessary. She went against rules. She went against the authority. And it was such a big crowd. The fact that she touched the hem of his garment means that she was on the ground and she could have got stomped on. Okay. So the first thing I want you to get is she had faith. Second, she took a risk again because she wasn't supposed to be out in public, y'all. She could have been arrested. She could have been stomped on. And what I know for sure is the number of times I've had to risk it all to gain it all in my own business, in my own calling, in my own ministry. And yes, my business is my ministry. God never promised it's going to be easy. But every time you stay in it, you don't give up. You have the kind of faith that will touch. If I could just touch, oh, God always blesses that. She persevered. Again, she went through that crowd. She was like, if I could just get there. And this was no ordinary crowd, y'all. This was thousands of people. And she had the nerve to come out stanking because she was bleeding. She smelled like blood. She did it afraid. And the great thing I want you to get is faith gets God's attention. And the reason I say this is because, listen, it says that in verse 46, Jesus says, somebody touched me. Now, what's so deep is she didn't touch Jesus's hand. She touched his clothing. It's like somebody just did like this to me. But on my, I'm not going to pull up my leg up here to say to him, right? Him of his garment. Him is at the bottom on the floor on the ground. And he said, wait a minute, somebody just touched me. How did Jesus know somebody touched him? That's deep, right? Mm-hmm. Have you ever really thought about that? That God can see your intention when nobody else can see it. And by the way, she touched the hem, meaning she's on the ground, crawling, probably trying to get to Jesus while everybody else is walking. Probably because she didn't want to be seen, but she was determined to get there. So it wasn't easy. She could have died because people could have stomped on her. She could have been arrested because she wasn't supposed to be out. And she could have smelled up the whole place. But no matter what, she was going to get to Jesus. My question to you is, do you have a no matter what mentality around your purpose? That you're not going to give up? That though it tarry, I'm going to do what it takes to stay in it. That's the kind of faith you need to do the thing God has called you to do. But so many people quit and give up. Listen, when she did all that, by the way, let me say this. Again, in verse 46, Jesus says, somebody touched me, right? The word touch comes from the root word hapto, which means to fasten or to cling to. This is in Greek, by the way. So when Jesus asked who touched me, he was not referring to the act of someone putting their hand on his hand. He was referring to the fact that this little touch she did meant she had unwavering faith, that she was going to get to him any way she could, even if it wasn't to Jesus seeing her eye to eye, that I at least could touch him. I can't say that over and over. I want y'all to really think about what that looks like. Okay. And so then after Jesus said, who touched me, she was trembling and scared. You know why? Because she wasn't supposed to be out there. She wasn't supposed to be doing that. She did it afraid. I can't say that enough. The number of people that want things to be easy, they want to have faith, but they want to have easy faith. You've heard me say this, that your comfort and your conviction can never coexist. It's not going to be comfortable when God is calling you to do something great. If you want to be easy, then you'll be mediocre. You'll sit average. You will settle for good enough. And if that's who you are, then you can just log off from listening to me and get out of my tribe. Because I'm allergic to average. If God is going to do abundantly above all, that has nothing to do with average. And so if you're going to prosper, if you're going to have the breathtaking future that is rumbling in your soul that God wants you to have, he wants all of us to prosper. You've got to be willing to not give up. You got to be willing to believe even when you can't see it. Like I did for that check. Oh, and I've had other examples of ways God has come through and I've been amazed. Like when I got the call to work with Steve Harvey. Listen, Steve Harvey didn't know I worked in entertainment. I worked in comedy for years. The one comedian I never met was Steve Harvey, funny enough. And when I had the opportunity to work with him to do a whole transformational series, and he got nervous, I was able to say, Mr. Harvey, I worked in comedy. I said, ask so-and-so about me. And he looked at me because then he knew that name. I said, so let me say this to you. Trust yourself. Look for the same gift God gave you to find the funny, find the breakthrough. Walked out of the room. The only reason I could do that is because of God. First of all, it was God that came up in me to say that in the first place, right? But here's what I really want you to get out of this whole conversation about faith. Because without faith and without working your faith, believing and doing nothing with it, what's the point? God's looking for your action. He's looking for what will you do when it's not easy, when the odds are against you, when nobody can see your gift but you. It's like you get pregnant with it. Nobody can push out that baby but you. And so nobody can push out your purpose but you. It's not anybody else's business but you and God. And yet, I hear so many excuses as to why people don't go after the thing God has created and crafted them to do. Why? Even in the parable of the talents, that I use as an example a lot. And if your first time here with me, go and read it. Matthew 25:14-30. The employee, it says servant, but I say employee, that did something with what he was given, what was said to him is this, and this is Matthew 25:23. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many. See, God is always going to expand your territory. He's looking for, what will you do with what I've given you? That woman with the issue of blood, the fact that she touched his hem, that little piece. Oh, he was blessed by her faith. Is God blessed by your faith, by your trusting him and not trusting what you can see? So I need you to understand, somebody is hungry for what you have. You are the answer. And some people, listen, you may be the only act of faith somebody will ever see. Think about it. When Matthew and Mark and Luke were writing these accounts in the Bible, do you think that their life story would be the Bible? What if your life story would be a story in the Bible, the book of Joy or the book of Kim or the book of, say your name? What if you were a book in the Bible, in the next version of the Bible in the making? Would your faith, your activation of what God is giving to you, would it make it in the book? I need you to understand that we each have an opportunity to have the faith that we need, and that our faith can move into action. And that's why you need purpose and profit. So let me say this. I'm going to invite you into part 2, but because I can only give you so much in part 2, and you need what I'm going to share with you in part 2 as well, I need you to get that you're going to need more than that. You're going to need strategy. But even as I read to you Romans 12:2, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed. Listen, my spirit-filled Bible says this under the notes. We are not to accept the pattern of an age who is of the devil. So either you're doing good or you're not. Either you're being conformed to what the world says, and the enemy's going to use that. The enemy uses comfort. He uses your emotions. He uses everything he can to keep you from your dominion. Okay? Listen, 1 Timothy 6:10 says, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness. What are you focused on? Think about what the world says. Are you focused on what does God say? Okay? So I need you to understand, to renew your mind, you've got to look at, how do you stay in faith? How do you keep faith-filled people around you? How do you stay activated into the highest and best version who God created you to be? Look, I got my notes mixed up now, right? The last piece is you need to understand the process. And because there's no way I can teach the process and give it justice, this is why I'm inviting you to join me for my 3-day masterclass starting next Sunday. So if you haven't heard about it, hang tight. I'm going to share with you about the masterclass, and then I'll come back and we'll wrap up this part 1 of our conversation. I see so many people talking about finding their purpose or starting a business only to get off track or trying to do a million different things. And why is this a bad thing? Well, because you end up being just okay at many things, but never great at the one thing that God created you to do. Now, here's the thing. When you focus on your one true calling, your brilliance will naturally shine through and change your life. It'll change your life, your business, and your bank account for the better. But how do you figure out the strategy to align your purpose with profit? Well, that's the exact reason I'm inviting you to join me for my free 3-day Purpose to Profit Masterclass. Register to join me by going to purposeprofitmasterclass.com. See, in those 3 days, I'm going to share the insight that changed the game, not just for me, but it's shifted the trajectory for others that I've been blessed to coach and teach. And here's what you must know. When you understand your purpose and how God wired you to make a profit from it, when you understand that you're not called to serve everybody or do everything, but recognize what you are called to do and you stand in it and learn how to create multiple streams of income from it, it changes everything. You don't want to miss this. And here's something else you must know. God will let you live on whatever level you settle for. And why would you settle for good enough? Yeah, I said that even if you're already successful, God has more for you to do. And he has a breathtaking future waiting for you. And that's the exact reason I'm inviting you to join me. Go to purposeprofitmasterclass.com and reserve your seat. I can't wait to serve you. So ultimately, everything I'm teaching you is really about God is watching your stewardship. See, stewardship means the conducting, supervising, or managing of something. He's looking at how are you managing what he gave you? How are you managing your purpose, your distinct natural ability? And how are you giving God a great return on his investment in you? See, it takes a process to get there. And so that process is what I'm going to walk you through in those 3 days during, again, the Purpose to Profit Masterclass. Go to purposeprofitmasterclass.com to register for your seat. I also give you a manual because if listen, if I said faith without works is dead, then I need you to be able to activate what I teach you because you got to be able to put into action the process it will take for you to move into the prosperous business that your purpose was intended to have. All right. So with that, that's the first two sections. Again, F plus P equals ROI. So we talked about ROI, we talked about F. I'm going to talk about P plus P in our part two. Now, part two is tomorrow morning in Clubhouse. Those of you that are here with me week after week, you know I dig deeper in part two. And I really want you to give some thought to what I've shared with you during our time together here. How are you giving God a great return on his investment in you? How are you stewarding the gifts that God placed inside of you? I need you to clear and intentional. And then I want you to look at the holes you may have. I'll dig into it further with you in part two, but I want you to think about that as you begin to look at how will you go after you abundantly above all for 2023? Who you are this year is great, but I'm here for that next level of you. As always, it's my honor and my privilege to be here with you every Monday, 7 p.m. EST. And next Monday, I'll be doing the Purpose to Profit Masterclasses Sunday, Monday, Tuesday of next week. So I won't be here for FPP Live. Make sure you register so you can join me. I don't want you to miss it because I want to set your 2023 up now. Well, you can't wait. All right. So with that said, have a phenomenal rest of your Monday night. I look forward to seeing many of you for our fppbreakfast.com in the morning at 8:30 a.m. EST. All right. Thank you for joining me. Bye, y'all.